Okay, we're good. Anyone not ready? Okay. The CIA ran drug trafficking operations to fund the cartels with devastated urban growth and created the cycle of black imprisonment and mass murder. This is web. In 96 for a decade in San Francisco, drug control, Towson cocaine, Sri Lanka, LA, fundamentally drug American real Army government, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, drug network, over the first pilot between Colombians and cocaine cartels and black neighborhoods, one of the first and most desirable oasis in the modern history, U.S. black army, and came to the count themselves of LA, and met with CIA agents, unaware supplies, military and political connections, three-way break, turn the cocaine powder, crack, and cold to the gang, charge, currently while the Afghans are, this barely memory that black America still dealing with this place, and the second like thousands of young black men are serving my president, for example, cocaine, drug restriction, and by never between before the CIA started bringing to the South Central and burning surprise the entire box of major cities and occasional war zones. 5,000 men and FDM was created to the CIA command cells to the fire attack out in his exile plan and she's been the drug control since her cocaine was running full time informant for the DEA. They blinded and the crowd would have set others away for life, but the Justice Department turned them loose and the kickstarted the war on drugs, which further criminalized black flesh in the American psyche. This is Alexander Chen. The Reagan administration launched a mass media campaign on the drug wars and now says horror stories compelling black crime users and characters to get a community's crack cocaine community program to the Reagan administration built support for the war. It was afraid of media images to create the national orders for drug food and hiding the planet from explained by new teach paradigm and district report. While users in these and viewers in these consistent with numerous other studies and studying network television news from 1990 to 1991 just against the administration to fighting against black drug criminal. The children was connected last week to drug users to the person who was college journal alcohol and drug education 95% picture black drug users same view responsible for the typical drug traffickers black ones suggests that crime trip so early makes the viewers that the magic black perpetrator would not exist. 60% of viewers who saw no image falsely said heavily the perpetrator to African American matrix keeps operating without conscious awareness or intent. One study involved when video in a place photographed white black individuals holding a gun or an object. Par is more likely to mistake black target's arm when he was not. Studies indicate that black people have become increasingly harsh by alleged criminals, darker, more stereotypically black. The research by cognitive social psychologists again suggests racial bias and drug wars is inevitable. The court level is maximized by racial discrimination that likely occur whenever it's the United States. The court believes some non-officers are free to use minor traffic violations. Some orders for investigations that court reject petition central claiming rules and claims racial laws will not be run on the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court has made emergency possible challenges to the criminal justice system under 14 that is part of litigation such claims under federal civil rights laws. And we move our story about the model minority in the opium fields of Southeast Asia, where the CIA is playing a major role in the development of Golden Triangle. This is Bitcoin 10. The CIA reported for Arkansas, the heroin manufacturing processing 100 raw kilos opium today, the only market outlet to the United States and U.S. military political activities, but it's a role shipping these dollars. Just one joint chance the CIA support for their counterinsurgency working. One day, one of the 90% of opium harvest is carried by national Chinese Army new caravans. One inviting the law enforcement stock risk and natural airlines and opium business. CIA's airline, Air American land, flying the opium out of the hills in Montana, Vietnam. The support to the CIA claims to see whether the Golden Triangle heroin trainers would be about ABC. Some of the league report on substitution opium traffic. The CIA announced identified 21 opium refineries. These refineries were located in the area totally controlled by paramilitary groups, including the former CIA after the heroin. Instituted by Mashallah, the Commander of Yamash Troops working for the CIA, more northwestern Laos, one of the heroin labs on the General Al-Qaeda, the only army in the world entirely financed for the U.S. government. One of the more captures to get head share of the Sham States opium trade with all shadow of army closely allied with the CIA, the U.S. Bureau of Narcotics reports that Jen Powell, the commander of the CIA secret army, has been operating heroin factories on the headquarters of CIA operations in northern Laos. And that's the formation of the Golden Triangle sees the European center colonialism and used by Western greed. This is McCoy. Then after Francis military recall, several hundred French war veterans colonists get to fade on 14 meters on that circuit the number of current airlines and air opium. These airlines we have to control lessons into the drug market selling the aviation pioneers and developed for frontier Air Force officer Sully Levent. There was a number for party for gangsters, the numerous amount of shipping between Southeast Asia and Europe cycles pretty convenience and transshipment points, substantial numbers of French traders here in Brazil, the social work Marseille, and the idea that all minorities used to oppress Asian American guerrillas as a method for the U.S. to undermine black political resistance. This fabrication created by white supremacy as a tool to create submissive dots on invisible Asian subject. This is young and 12. Asian American level ability, the right to harbor intelligence, bigger armor, to recommend the black power movements, 1969, the New York Times article successor in Japanese American style, brought the concept of Mago minority, was the hard-working values without running from being a Paul minority implications, black political resistance with a real problem, conservative elites, fabricating right for U.S. crime problem, just by saving oppression, social movements, and putting the black power movements, the right conservative more power or the crime to hate democracy, U.S. confronted the race problem, and then criminalized the content model minority method, emerged casting Asian Americans, law-abiding, hard-working, implicitly enforcing the permanent criminalization of blackness, and the Asian Americans are subjected into the violence as a result of the narrative of black criminality could only resist by allowing themselves within the black-white binary since young 14. which is paying attention to the bullet trail. Black bodies with the comments, one of the raging left fire beneath the actual content that do not move across the policing system as an Asian American black race occupies an important place. I come from war. You will control occupy trying to live in raging progress and silence. I hold my own rage as part of my identity. American culture, black culture, humanity, narrative, black community, Southern Asian Americans, minority, resources, narrative, Asian death, red, visible, now the right to power structure, Asian lives, elections, I said, minority, orientals, narratives, different public structure of sexualism, and meritocracy doesn't mention visibility, Asian death, now Asian American identities, and played by minority, black race, a whole such important nations moving towards two societies, one black, one white, one separate, and unequal. Asian Americans end up in between black just minus, which they're visible, troubling, the doctrine, cross-fire, often reading words, not black, our options, visibility, publicity, resistance, black, race, the whole percent of the correct side of the color line, Asian American is not monolithic, occupied both the economic spectrum, most, they need demographic identity, not by cultural critique, the nation, use economy, black political system, rooted in that black is place between my taking position within a separate, but unequal, or white blacks, either left or right of the color line, there's no sitting out, Asian American identity forged by black women, liberation struggle, centered, emancipation, and imperialism, we do the harm of healing, and states of violence over criminalization of black and brown people must end forever, and education, white, purposes, all forms mutually enforcing mess off, black minority have no place, vigilant, Ferguson, does Ferguson matter Asian Americans? Yes. Next. Anti-blackness is the fulcrum of white supremacy, meaning that any serious challenge to account for it must account for it. This is not the government 14. They say the folks in white life reinforce the binary putting not black people covered criminals, problems in the middle, and that racism, fulcrum, white supremacy, fulcrum is defined by its word, which is returns in one that supplies capability for action. There is a binary which white people just one side with force of attention today that reinforce the fulcrum of anti-blackness, racism, racist slavery, is a sort of place for economy, federal system, business, slavery, overseas rights, federal elections, are to close all of all around anti-black racism, fear of black people, that's natural policies of climate, they propaganda where there's no hierarchy of oppression where race is concerned, but anti-black racism is the fulcrum white supremacy, therefore, arealize the model minority beauty is a means for challenging the anti-black violence of the drug war waged by the United States federal government, and the role of the ballot to vote for whomever best ideologically and argumentatively disrupts the criminalization of the black body. And next. The model minority community is a crucial space to dismantle institutions that perpetuate state violence and cheap power. In fact, in favor of black liberation, this is Young and 14, that's Black Lives Matter, it's all set all black lives, model minority community is a call to examine complicity in the system, it's opening to announce marginalization of Americans, vulnerable state violence, refugees of war, carried by 6 American profiling, carried lawyers, carried lawyers, job, the informal economy, incarcerated, undocumented, trans, disabled, queer, cis, women, dark skin, seeking Muslims, invitation of Americans unite to dismantle apparatuses to state violence by believing that they're targeting the system, the Carolina state, and the vital health nation, this reality, the justice, radical class movements, have no applications, assassinated, forced exile, the model minority movements pull the Asian American movement off the these states are also knowledge and tools to build authentic relations to also strategically shift power, Black Lives Matter, from an abstract and this shit in certain time. Asian American voices have communicated and now lift ourselves at the expense of others, but the link arms with others, take up the ultimate front of black liberation and the existence of the black white binary is clear by the settler state to use Asian Americans as legitimizing anti-blackness. Asian Americans will flip back binary and along with black resistance to fight white subjugation. This is young in 1013. We were valued about minority status, owned by white elites, immense power of who they reach, all but how much is possible. Result there to be our problem, anti-like racism, and legitimacy, model freedom, the racial reputation when elites offered. If you simply stand up and settle, so you behave, will let you hustle for your poverty to go on. Be white, but white elites will be black, will be opposed to child American dreams, together we'll squash these services, ends our fortune, the war, trying to set up a massive political principle that relies on the white fear of black, climate, white supremacy, sees also from game, we're supervised by participating in the exclusion and expectation of other neoliberalism. It's a zero-sum cage, the idea of black criminality, the policing, and best incarceration necessary. Asian Americans, the anti-black and settle the watching and spoken to maintaining white economic political dominance as Asian Americans. We decided we were alongside Black Chicano Native American liberation groups, understanding ourselves as intelligent subjects of the U.S. empire liberation depends on freedom. We take it back in time, the world is changing. So if we, the racial justice which leads us to experience the war, the intestine that anti-black racism were necessary to dismantle apparatuses of state violence, committed as Yuri Kuchiyama, was Black liberation experience, also shit to think about the mess of Hamagami shapes, Japanese king's commitments to non-violence, criminalization, domestic place of imperialism. We are stronger together. It's been time for Asian Americans on these model minority community like arms to show Black liberation together, fight to the world right side up, let's create a unite front against white supremacy and blackness must be included in the analysis of Asian oppression because construction of the model minority based on the criminalization of berating the black body. This is Kim and 14. Song highlighted the entanglement between Black and Asian American theory and civil society. Asian American become less of a model whose success was specifically the rape rights war of a civil minority whose success was berate everyone, which include the Black and any discussion of model minority concern insinuates the antithesis to the model. People of African descent have the greatest unity in that category. Asian American was status as super minority or close to Michelle Alexander, recently diagnosed with color by public consensus and personal traits, responsible consensus for the majority of black men on the criminal justice system. For a politics to become legible, it must celebrate all such subjects as APR human, which puts regular structural antagonism as during black bodies is always already non-human. Only by attending to structural antagonism that blackness can be brought to a sharply when the concept of human is invoked, it has the effect of putting under rage the blackness grammar of suffering.
Okay, process.
Alright, what is anti-blackness?
Anti-blackness, we think it's part of the large structure of civil society that places bodies who've been placed in the black side of the binary and corrects antagonism and sort of that. I'm sorry.
In what ways?
In what ways? Well, the way that the ask contextualizes one way is through the war on drugs and the recent push to the war on crime.
Well, I guess, how does the model minority community challenge the war on drugs?
Yes. Well, it challenges the criminalization, which is of the black body, which is at the heart of the war on drugs. Their argument is that the way.
We say that when we break what has been used as the antithesis to like black criminality that white supremacy has been using, using us as the example of like the minority that can make it inciting our
So
like, we get
criminalization of blackness is premised on the myth of the minority.
It's not premised on it, but the model minority myth plays into it.
Yeah, we read a piece
What
of
else
young
plays
evidence.
into it? So how do you resolve that?
Well, we would say that if white supremacy garners power from this model minority
Sure,
myth,
but you said
challenging it in
that's,
this
you said
instance.
that's one of the ways. What are the other ways that white supremacy gains a form of power to criminalize blackness?
Sure, we would say another way is in the CIA's complicity in the Dark Alliance, their ability to use state action to be able to have these like racist covert action. This is another way that they have
So
gone in
you
their
disengage from state action.
Yes.
And that's what your job indicates that model minority community encourages is a disengagement from state action.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, we'll talk about that. What does it mean to strategically shift power?
Did you point to a specific piece of evidence?
This
Or?
is your Young 14 evidence.
Which one? I'm sorry.
The solvency mechanism for the act directly.
Oh, all right. Yes. The argument is that by refusing to uphold that idea of like the perfect minority, it is a kind of not really shift in power, but rather shift in the positionality of Asian Americans on the black line.
Young evidence says to just strategically shift power. So what does that mean? I get that you don't think that that's what that means.
I mean, we think. Well, okay. So it's post-affirmative. We would endorse. Right now, Asian Americans are upheld on the white side of the barrier. Our argument is that by building coalitions, by refusing to affirm that and be a tool of white supremacy, that would be ability to strategically shift power to black liberation movements. Our young evidence also, like historically, makes these arguments like model minority myth was used to suppress black political resistance in the 60s.
What does it mean to arm ourselves with knowledge? And what do we do once we acquire that knowledge?
Well, our argument is like the 1AC was a like form of knowledge production, like all speech acts are.
And like examples of this knowledge is like the CIA's complicity in acts like destroying the Golden Triangle, the Dark Alliance.
Okay, so I guess a model minority would, I guess, analyze that knowledge and determine concrete grassroots political actions based off of that knowledge.
I mean, we don't need to determine what that concrete grassroots action is, but we say in the context of this debate round, that.
Okay, what does it mean to include blackness in an analysis of Asian oppression, which is your last piece?
Yep. The last piece of Kim evidence, it's the affirmative. It's the idea that blackness and Asian American, the model minority myth are intertwined, at least in recent history.
Sounds good. Okay.
All right.
Can you catch?
Yeah.
Not really.
That's a good question to ask. Water bottle's in the way, man. yeah, I care about that. You want to use our step?
Go first. This is what you did. Now I'm gonna have
I should start. I should start.
She just came. Did you see this? This needs to come out. This needs to go back.
What's going on?
Theorizations of blackness need to begin with the black naked genie. Alternative leaves black women behind in turns cases to James 13 Afro realism, confronts theoretical imitation, political practices, and conceptualized freedoms of resilience that allows for continuous agency configured in the Atlantic slave trade, challenged by the emergence of the Chicago rebellions of unity of racial capital, racial freedom, continuity. America's Afro realism journey moves adjacent to democracy, originating, reproducing the Mount Abbott, racial casting, and racial races, through the lens of the black nation, black nation allows for a broader grassroots anti-black statement, citizenship, terror, voodoo, agency, pursuit, freedom, reform, marine philosophy, Afro-realist political theory to move beyond the habitual militarized borders, conservative violence, and towards the black nation, black reproductivity, democracy, aggressive against black nations, it's a terror, against black reproductive labor, and sexual racial representative described here as the intimate violence violations of black reproductivity, the terror against black reproductivity, Afro-realism, that is local cause of racial scrutiny to the sexual assault of black reproductivity under the theorized future of black captivity, reproductive viewpoints of the black features of society, symbolic and material subjugation that where the murdering philosopher with the concept of racial capital overshadows racially outlined democracy, boundaries, control the terrors obscured against black features to shape those borders, Afro-realism redirects the normal philosophy, exterior defective, productivity and reproductivity, the race gender differences in masculine, masculine, black suffering, violence against the female forms, black women, female child, and visible and combating black exploitation, trauma, white supremacy, and holding black female trauma into the black male frame, thus the common perception of black suffering become representation of male trauma and the amounts of consideration will become soon of the racial capital of the narrative about violence that constitute slavery in Mexico country, proud of the black matrix displacing from the philosophical and increasing subjugation by those who know themselves are victims, black matrix of racial patriarchal, racial and sexual violence, economic apartheid, terrorists, meet the black nations, decentralized democracy, and democracies and philosophy, roots, demystification to the foreign culture, as well as injustice in the black nations, moments terrifying and beautiful because the violence they translated is a rupturous commissionable political protest politicized by both this transform these tragedies into a breach in democracy's concern of wire and the United States affirmation of a modern minority unity is one that affirms the continuation of Black Lives Matter movement, replicates the same silence of transition and one of which turns the cases started 2015 down with parents to share the collective trend doing the Raleigh, Ohio, scheduling, embracing men and women engaged for transforming conversation made me feel very unsafe because I didn't know what people were living through my safe and transition when I told the group that this snack of our lower happiness in today's worthy life of saving you that whatever didn't want to be able to move the dose and said we each flash from real life. There's the black community now fear beginning completely silent about the workers that have been happening in our community last year. 12 trans women who killed color killing were in the middle with no responsible black community with wild folks feeling practice all about black matter and now talking about black trans women and the what I see called for minority mutiny has come to signal the hallmark of post-civil rights era which an attempt to strategically integrate Asian Americans' experience into civil society, which obscures structural antagonism into black and produce violence and sex and 10, the Caldwell paradigm become the hallmark inclusive rightarian multi-racial coalition politics, immigrants, rights, and liberal multicultural conservative public governments operating immediately within broad-based strategic integration of deployments to distinction from the conflict is that it's outside of political antagonism involving within it cannot be satisfied by organization and process of range, exploitation, and exclusion while the pattern indicates a singularity in racial slavery and afterwards absent paradigm sentient and being failed with crushing the objecthood and ultimately bushwalls and fight for without the clinical barrier for more mobility, resilience, conferences, period, restoring historical promise of transformation, and fight the book guarantees mom and have an audience like silly and joy that has no community capital and this controversies and transportation of blackness and existing foreclosure possibility of black redemption through the working organization works of funded right war against the possibility of opposition of black and right recovery, casting the romance of community, but is complete the material purity beyond the powers of their police treated as when they can be leaders who post a bunch of collection and the abundance for passionate political subjectivity through the model minority community disavows the possible agency of the slave by affirming in hope for reconciliation, domination, how their experience of productive politics of agency and choice. The slave is an honorable subject within civil society, which forecloses the position of the slave making violence and inevitable is the harmony and Wilson no greater streaming integrated the rights to the subject of the decision to come alive between of the narrative of the opportunity for celebration. Unfortunately, social group which was history down king by the new facilities the agency of dominant groups and result of celebratory narratives of the oppressed there a space that you can carve out terrorizing the apparatus and will exist outside the culture's world. Some autonomy approaches to the arguments and notion of virginity and the constants of the status of the slave position, how we find women and white women different findings this articulates the notion of consent opportunity not accepted for consent meaningless and disposal as object consistent with contrary notion of subjectivity predicated on the negation of both the Jenkins has to deny her status as negation of both she can tell a story about sexuality that is being formed by dominant this is failures raises a question of whether transgender sexuality is applicable to conditions that captive community existence and space and application is captive interest possible interaction whether it's the paradox and agency who are in fiction circumstances now see the space of negation which is black with this and blackness there's no life there's not no knowledge just the perception of the huge the whole society can devour certain terrain and so sometimes individually sometimes collectively devour that is the center of the heart of the world with the cell around the picture and attaching our resistance focus dimensions of grasping through organizations the legal reformist paradigms of marketplace and black discerning the cases Jones 2015. The legal liberal reforms paradigm supports that I don't think the language of black resistance to racism of the United States will no other free no best. There is no hashtag available traditional slave proposed slave result and tradition of black self-defense begins or defense of the just practice the party black liberation and black power movements are the sickness or suppressing neighborhood and rights of civil rights movements of radical limitations are highlighted by the fire and right traditions we call black masses of Ferguson who settled the slave state cannot create the civil rights civil rights are as the imaginable right of black liberation, policing, and political liberty orientation, imagination of life, via bourgeoisie, economic politics, and media, whether they're academic or how they happen to live black chance of black liberation practices found such coordinate and being free media and burning plantation, black power, hashtag, black lives matter, black persons, black lives matter, now for and self now in column, nullifying politics of simulation, tragedy, important yet to whom black people never cease to matter ourselves and people never cease to be important for the right radical state opposites capitalism is travel and the international or external national enemies system better it is basically the black lives matter soldiers wrong-headed in the sky the half of the Americanism this is illegal center a lot of social notion of racism cycles of classical legal protective posture and go find the richer right makes and the power to pose the question is greater as great as power of all the only ethical demand is impossible to call to return subjectivity to the slave to return material island to the side which is what the slave said. Black women accused of having been stolen so is telling herself it's just later are going to turn to QC bringing us on the man sitting on the sidewalk and standing your other form of pedestrians where they is selflessly relentless because of the neglect and settle off the settle off like the crime of the men's blood the actual crime of burns out equal fairness available modern politics security watch for their sensitivity to violence separate from modern growth capacity to think that exist spatially and temporally for their commodity was not saved this pattern what she was articulating trying position to the loss of body dereliction of core political she gave birth to the body of the human yet she had subjectivity or something to show for the world which she calls a crazy but her both attribute to neighborhood standing return to for a lot of the savage free hair knowledge is subjectivity of the same two simple sentences to follow royal so simple and structured the nice pragmatic to be dismantled the ethical modernity to know lawyer sound like an oxymoron the five questions of on policy is equal and intellectual mediations and political work sounds completely expert.
Open the question. First question. Jones' evidence, other than not talking about black matrix, what argument in the 1AC was made that actively precludes that strategy for starting?
I'm sorry,
Like, other than like not talking about it, what argument in the 1AC was detrimental to the Black interests?
That's the argument that you need to start with, I guess, the figure of the Black woman understanding like Black reproductivity in order to, I guess, get your role of the ballot, which you say is to liberate Black lives and disrupt that criminalization. Criminalization of Black women stems from the sight of the womb, so you don't get access to that.
Okay.
When you
Yeah, I think this is important. It's not whether or not the 1AC has precluded it, it's whether or not the 1AC structural analysis of anti-Blackness is one that is sufficient to resolve or even educate properly about the interworkings of anti-Blackness. We think that your analysis of the myth of minority has foreclosed a possibility of understanding the way that Black reproductivity in particular sutures the underlying political structure of
Next question, second one to star evidence. It's in the context criticizing transphobic conversations that this person overheard at activist rallies. What part of the 1AC was a transphobic conversation?
No, that part is talking about like the Black Lives Matter movement, which you kind of continue in your 1AC. It talks about how those movements are transphobic because every time those women, trans women were murdered, there were never rallies around those bodies. It was always ignored. And the 1AC furthers that silence.
All right. Next question, Sexton Link. It's a critique of immigrant rights and conservative colorblindness. Again, what's the link to the 1AC?
Well, no, sure. Sexton evidence is an index to your 1AC's idea of multiracial coalitions. He indicates that multiracial coalitions that begin from the standpoint of a paradigm shift, i.e. a junk evidence, which is a shift in power relations, is one that is necessarily problematic, given that it is only capable of reifying the myth of the minority as a political conflict versus actually attending to the structural antagonism, which at its fundamental core is one.
Okay. Next question, Harmon Wilderson Link. The argument is that there is a difference between the positionality of Black women and white women. What's the link? Like, you tagged it as Asian women, or
No,
some of the tags are, but like this evidence is not saying Asian women.
Our Hartman and Wilderson evidence is indicting the idea of reclamations of subjectivity, which is what the myth of the minority movement is about, which is what all of the junk evidence is about, especially the portions that you don't cut. He gives the example of a distinction between Black and white women to outline the idea of notions of consent, but the card is in the context of attempts to reclaim political agency and political subjectivity and the ability to make demands on political institutions.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification question on the alternative. Do you defend like giving back the land and return?
Well, we defend the impossibility of posing the question of whether or not it is effective.
So it's an alternative to ask the question.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But the power to pose an impossible question. You like to ask the question. But once you ask the question.
Stop prep, we're at 328. Please. So we have 6:32 left.
Actually, please say it.
Like,
No.
13 days.
Orders you can face it over here and then K. For the first row.
It's 6 claims in month.
Who's kick?
Case it.
Case kick. We're good. She's trying to steal all of my pens.
Extend our vote ballots to the vote ballots of over team who best disrupts the criminalization of black body. Our advocacy is the refusal for Asian Americans to continue to be used as tools of white supremacy and to switch sides from the white side of the binary to the black side of the binary, to take away power from white supremacy and to refuse to continue to be cited as reasons that racism doesn't exist. And we say that we confront the CIA and the state in their part in racist covert actions like the Dark Alliance for building the Golden Triangle and constructing the Mall minority to reveal the complicity of state in this crime. And third, we recognize that anti-blackness is the fulcrum of all white supremacy, and our advocacy is to create a united front to oppose it. And the only alternative to our advocacy is allowing the violence and oppression to continue. It's time to wage an Asian American war on white supremacy, raising our voices in public spaces such as debate our key co-14. Asian Americans were one going to refuse to police after murder of black men in the SWAT team who could talk to them go during the meeting. They agreed that clearly was a misdemeanor extrajudicial. Please clearly harm them Asian Americans. Similar history of racial discrimination, but the same need to get our allies, Americans, small minority, it's false talking to Americans about violent location workers, Asian Americans, and police because of the small minority, because of the century long epidemic when it comes to death of at least Asian Americans participated in civil rights 40 years ago. I'm getting the defense about being good allies, being good people, confident, stealing, and all being not facing threat, using these arguments to excuse aggressivity and white racism, really digital complicity, white supremacy, fundamentally corrupt relationships with ourselves, Asian Americans, trying to get a culture, doing some racism, public space. If there was supremacy, wrong, participate in any white supremacy structure. Asian Americans, up in the many circumstances, but also kids kills black, Latino, Native people, benefit of slavery, colonialism, and genocide institutions run on the principles. Asian Americans pay taxes, support the massive incarceration, and work on business, living white supremacy is bounded over operating racial from fed operations, white supremacy structure, literally kills the label. Many of us participate in victory, collecting social and economic capital, but we push back against system, makes it complicit in racist murder, suppression of black, Latino, Native people, black and black, trans women, men, and non-binary people face daily sexual outside of violence. Heads of state actors start living as allies to the arms and allies and disease. Not only are fighting worthwhile use of allies, because it makes it in front of being an ally. I will come to white supremacy, responsible, stop talking Asian American war, white supremacy needs to legal of the American dream. On this way of benefit, pushing ourselves against white supremacy, being way to reduce all daily struggles and to find every part of our lives in place to activism, Western battlefields, serving just against white supremacy, against anti-black racism, and native immigration, which all white supremacy is built. We don't need white supremacy on our success is ways not to because let's supremacy slide. And
The first thing that they read is only a legal omission that we don't include Black women in our analysis, but if the minority mutiny means a mutiny of all kinds for an analysis of how oppression fits into anti-Black oppression, that means we advocate for an analysis of why this exists in the absence of other oppressions that are not existing in the current movement. Just because I began with my personal subjectivity doesn't mean that our methodology does not advocate for the presence of black women in the movement. There is no foreclosure. It's left as an open question of how we can analyze how the state has done crimes such as the Dark Alliance and the Golden Triangle, and how we can be able to push back on racist covert actions such as this. And they say that we are only a continuation of the Black Lives Matter movement, and this leads to trans silence. But if we are a analysis of what the Black Lives Matter movement is currently missing, and trying to analyze how we can fit Asian American experience into this, and we're going to link to this argument. We are rejecting the idea of Asian Americans in specific making that the idea that they are supposed to be docile and submissive and not making a fuss, and this rejection of docility and silence means that we would advocate for the greater participation of trans bodies in the movement. And Junk 14 specifically talks about the inclusion and importance of trans women in the conversation about how the minority has been constructed by white male domination, how we can fit it into the movement for change. And they also say that the minority community is reminiscent of a post-civil rights area, and if this card talks about liberal reform, we're also going to link to this argument. We make an analysis of the structural antagonisms that exist, starting with how the CIA has smuggled cocaine into Black neighborhoods to begin the war on drugs. This is a structural analysis of how they have further criminalized Blackfish in the American psyche. This is our Alexander 10 evidence that talks about how Blackness is an ontological position, and this analysis means that we meet this argument with our the analysis of structural antagonisms is at the forefront of our advocacy, and also we are a rejection of civil society. This part, the tag of this card talks about how this is only a movement to further assimilate Asian Americans into civil society. We are in opposition of obscuring the existence of other oppressions within this framework of white supremacy. It's not simply a liberal glossing over the black-white binary. We realize that the black-white binary is the structuring of how the world is today, and instead of taking this out and trying to take a contingent multicultural approach, we instead saying that we will no longer refuse to be white side of the binary, but instead align on the black side of the binary. And they say that we are only affirming hope and treating the slave as an honorable subject. With the third link, this is the Hartman card. First of all, this card talks about how there's differences between white women and black women, which means there's no link, and also they're not a celebratory narrative. We are a recognition of how the world is anti-black. We talk about how things like the mass incarceration rates, the prison industrial complex, and the war on drugs. This is a recognition of first how anti-black the world is, so that so we can have the possibility for resisting this and change. And the Mall minority, they read this argument about how we are only a grassroots organization. This card talks about movements like the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army, and say how these are the models that we should be using. But the Mala minority myth was created to suppress these revolts. Mala minority myth started in a New York Times article in the midst of the Black Liberation movement, and this was created by white supremacy to suppress the same movements that they're saying that we should be moving. So we must first challenge Mala minority myth before we can engage in this sort of a good revolt that they're talking about. We are a prerequisite to be able to move towards this, rather than the what they call hashtagging movements of today. The app is in a replication of these grassroots movements. We are starting with an analysis of how other oppressions can fit within this and start a greater united front by taking away the tools that white supremacy has used to, white supremacy in the state has used to subjugate colored bodies. And on the alternative, we are a prerequisite alternative to first ask this question of whether Turtle Island can be given back to the natives. It begins with analyzing how white supremacy operates and be able to challenge the same system that brought us in the first place. We are an analysis of colonialism. This is our McCoy evidence that talks about the Golden Triangle, how CIA brought about the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia to be able to replicate federal colonialism. And so this structural analysis of how it's happened historically and still continuing today, and providing a methodology to be able to resist this, means that we are prerequisite to this question. And also, we are not mutually exclusive. There's probably a reason for the permutation. Also, the disadvantage to alternative alone is because it does not solve for the existence of the Mala minority. It doesn't solve for how Asian Americans are seen as a docile, submissive subject. Only the permutation can access both of these. Also permutation to the app. I did a pretty good work on the links and talked about how we actually are our advocacy, our methodologies, and call for inclusion of what they flagged as the missing groups in the current Black Lives Matter movement. It isn't some type of liberal reform that relies on multicultural coalitions or that begs for Asian Americans to be included in civil society. It's a rejection of it. And we include a specific analysis of the model minority myth that's contributed to create the image of the unspoken passive Asian American woman, naturalizing sexual violence in the Asian feminine body to Asian Pacific women are being racially sexually harassed, descended in sexual racial stereotypes, some racial gender stereotypes, and model minority myth means listening part of the super successful theorized relates to Asian Pacific American women has to be submissive to anticipated gender through the soccer trail, obedience to violate Asian Pacific women, popular culture compliant, Asian from nature feeds harassed relief, a Pacific woman views such as not by fact, objectification is a material value trans women's contribution based on accomplishments and perceptions of political harass Asian Pacific women suffer greater harassment due to racial interceptions, exotic hypererotic masochistic desires for sexual domination, some ideal typical gratifiers of Western neo-colonial liberal formation, colonial military domination, anti-woman sexual domination provide ultimate Western methodology, the objective gender stereotype, Asian Pacific women, political discrimination, just Asian Pacific Americans use against nominal concepts, the ultimate wellness of fantasy product of colonial sexual mythology based on Western perceptions, Susie Wong's original modern fantasy, Asian Pacific American woman is subset of the university despite well cultivated image and light and gentle environment that do not tolerate the sun distinguish itself from other hostile environments. And Asian American women suffer the sexual and second injury through the second standard of sexuality. Or further identity, Asian American women are seen as sexual commodities that constrains her from both representations of her body and sexuality to 97. Stereotypes of religious identity and recognized differences between stories and model minority stereotype have comments about existing disagrees, social gender stereotype, information descriptions, active differences, rebalance, power relations, gender stereotypes, racial media, and Asian Pacific women treated on sexuality gets top stereotyping, secretly large role in knowing power relations, active tasks, Singapore getting equal to visit don't agree Singapore all that functions of the derived relationship between American credentials and favorite status in the department of willing to engage with chair and exchange for economic function made frequently comes up seen talks like outside of depicted in the copying part with the common friend department chair and okay, permanently alternative. There's no mutually exclusive parts of our affirmative and the alternative. In fact, we are a prerequisite to posing the question of whether Turtle Island should be returned to the natives. White supremacy must be challenged in ways that
Okay, what are all the terms?
Sorry, my one.
What's that context?
Yes. The perms are perm to both, perm to the af, and perm to the alternative.
How does perm to the af function?
How is perm? Well, we would say that in our the model minority mutiny, it already includes the question of how we relate to the land. Our young evidence talks about how, or the co-evidence I read in the 2AC talks about how Asian Americans have benefited from white supremacy, and it specifically talks about how we are living on stolen land from the natives.
I get that.
Yes.
How does that solve the ballot?
How does that solve our
Actually, not the ballot. How does that solve the criticism?
How does that solve the criticism? Well, we say that it includes all the groups all the parts that you said were missing from the affirmative. It was more like a re-articulation that yes, this is included. And second, we say that resolves the alternative itself because the question can be posed with the methodology of the affirmative.
That was like really surfacey. Could you go again?
Yeah. Can you explain what you're confused about?
Like you said. Can you tell me how the 1AC includes, I guess, an analysis of how Black women operate within the realm of anti-Blackness?
Okay, well, we would say that in our analysis of how there are important missing parts in the current way
What
that
are these important missing parts? Because you're being very, very generic.
What are these important missing parts? The inclusion of non-cis women mostly. We talk about Sikhs and Muslims and within Asian Americans.
Where do you get that analysis? Because it seems that you are only talking about the docility and passivity of Asian American women.
Well, if we are
Do you think
rejection
that
of
Black
the,
women fit into that stereotype.
well, if we are rejection of the scripts that are imposed by the same white structures that created the model minority.
Okay, how are you an analysis of those scripts onto Black women?
If we are critiquing the very structure that creates those same scripts, then if we were critiquing that period.
I think
So Black power movements who rallied around white supremacy, but also rape Black women. Is that
okay? First of all, that's not us. Second of all, she read a piece of Shoei's show.
I get that, but I'm saying my argument is that rallying around a structure doesn't mean that you include those people. So I'm asking you, what specifically is your analysis of it?
So first, the Tracy piece of show evidence that Aaron read in her speech.
The show evidence is about the docility and the sexuality of Asian American women.
Yes, I mean, it is also as Bryce, you brought her
How
question
does
up.
that, what does that have
I
to do
cannot
with?
use connect the sentence after this. It does not like it begs the broader question of racial and sexual racialized gender stereotype, which we could argue is like a key part of the analysis of how like racism, sexuality,
And how settler colonialism plays in.
That's cool.
sorry.
Okay, let's set it up in session. One card on the paper, that's it. Y'all put it in the right
Why did he even run? It was like walking speed.
Right. That's why I just really threw it.
He's gonna run, guys. Left foot, right foot. Left foot, left foot.
I don't think I need to copy.
No?
I didn't just put
Okay,
it.
I'll just give him the job.
Okay, thanks. I love making him angry every year. Fix it. Oh, I did not do it.
The other is just the criticism. There's gonna be a short overview and then the perms are gonna be at the top. Probably need a lot of space for the perm. The one team for closing analysis, structuring black to do research and civil society, going ethics and debates and power to posing possible questions of turn around to the status of activities like money, actually taking the civil society, particularly as possible premise that there was a reformable action with structurally reify the position of human recreating impact civil society, only alternative to integrate the call, the call of this activity ethical frame to properly analyze and grab up without reintegrating the girls back into the living perception of the human. Now, to the purpose they don't get a purpose about the method to make day. The makes one they see not testable, increase better teaching for the because it makes the big part of educational model because they will always fight out of what's what they see me indicates that method is key to test the nuances between scholarship, which is a better form of productive thinking, given that this, given that they don't tie themselves to an inherent plan text trees that this is about form they know all three parts attach themselves to institutional value making black and Asian people fungible resources with impact testing and first because they're always reify the model knowledge because the society will always find new ways to use the Asian body to exploit on behalf of anti-black purposes, which is an independent reach rejecting affirmative absent the criticism and shape for allowing institutional purpose to preempt all the destructive life liberty when we identify our test. The rights of birth come to you as most of the things that you know, like the institution and policy in the sense to be consistent, only perpetuating every such entity, you make some values for the resource for the institutions once we have identified ourselves any purpose beyond ourselves, we can become who most sensible to our to attach us to external values, separate us from the instance of our focus on this being now digitally heard to the alternative settlements to have to the advocacy of the one given that we are impact turning the focus on the one is not starting from the potentiality of posing a problem question of whether or not sensitivity should be returned to the same whether or not turn or others should return to the challenge created for better form of debate. This turns to the affirmative education claims given that increase the justification for the affirmative become a moving target which it can not parts of the answer, but not parts, but the entirety of the fucking affirmative, which makes the one moot point also this makes it impossible to test the affirmative voter fairness out there. There's also no net benefits any of the permutations articulated out in choosing between you to be very skeptical language, the only potential one is the amount of minority arguments which we are impacted. Now, all the links are also disadded to perfectly affirmative. I will do the link debate here. The first is subjectivity disadded. One is his affirmation of minority medias and attempts to research your political subjectivity was disavowed the impossibility of agency for the slave and the savage. I will say, and part of evidence indicates that the inclusionist rhetoric of the left attempts to take narratives of political disenfranchisement, i.e., the myth of minority, and create the political basis for celebration of the possibility reform, i.e., in that quote from there, John evidence that they don't copy off of minority as hope to transform U.S. political, economic, and cultural systems to value humanity over capital, generation of war, which is there. One is this junk evidence versus starting the position of absolute in the real symbolic election models in the Harvard indicates that this alternative location of agency that attempts to carve out spaces of freedom and recent resistance of the terrorizing state apparatus in order to transform civil society to value autonomy, humanity, which is two impacts the turning affirmative. The first it is the negation of blacks in order to resituate the modern agency that it is in its very essence purifies the structure of colonial humanism, which turns to affirmative given that the blacks are denied the very humanism, the one they see attempts to have political structures value. The second is it requires a forced telling of the black and Asian stories that require disavow of her status as as her status of black and Asian so that she can tell a story about sexuality and racism that is meaningful and white dominated colonial flame, which leads to the negation of her work, which turns to affirmative particularly it was also particularly answers to two pieces of child evidence about Asian Americans and women that degree the criticism, which is also independent link to the criticism given that as tips of fold female slave girl suffering into 18 oppression, which is all is a show evidence. Also, the last piece of White Kim evidence, which can only ever structurally justice slave focusing precludes the possibility of the alternative. The second big argument that is also a disadvantage to all the permutations in this multi-racial coalition. They are not doing the proper analysis for our sex evidence in any case that the attempt to form multi-racial coalitions that give from the standpoint of a paradigm shift is merely anti-racialist right to submit no matter what when it comes to represent a political conflict, i.e. political that can be satisfied the best versions of the one they see is outlined by the portion of the junk evidence that they also don't use, which indicates that the type of, and I quote, grassroots organization and networks organizing on the ground in Asian American communities required will be the Southeast Asian Freedom Network, which as of June 17th on their Facebook page are negotiating and making demands of the United Nations and the Human Rights Network to review and take action to have the Cambodian government improve the civil rights of Cambodian citizens to achieve the level of capacity of human agency autonomy to make demands of political institutions, which research structural anti-blackness turning against our sex and evidence also indicates that the ability to perform a mutiny, to organize a sense of coherent, complete community with coherent, coherent, transferable political demands can be made, which is disarticulated at the level of the slave which black redemption is foreclosed, particularly in the context of organizing, in which Ferguson becomes a pretty good goddamn example, which fractures purpose obviously given that sexist has started our politics from a romanticization of community radically wars against the possibility of and oppositional blacks that a third link argument that is also a disadvantage to the permutation of independent giving a disadvantage to the athletes, the consciousness raising there when they see junk evidence indicates that the model minority community attempts to acquire more knowledge that they then use to determine political grassroots action, which just reifies the political structure of humanism, turning cases in that series into models of mirror gravitational models focus on the as this ideology critique focuses on what might be conformity and the correspondence sneak back and do the back of the subject forms the dialectic modes that simply mirrors objects and divides the system, mediation, reproduces the system. It's about the subject must be trained to truly express the system with unbelievable by reproducing this is the role of critiquing its conformity correspondence between the subject and the system of power that reproduces the potential for change conflict critical conscious critique seems an unloaded weapon in the face of relentless acting out of power of conformity at a precarious level of habit. It's only conscious force, only conscious force is strong. You melt account of those powers of self-interest and life. The subject all the more affirming into position doesn't make a true choice depending on the identification and faithfully based on others as a sovereign individual who usually sharing thoughts and experience that our argument is that the way that structural anti-black resources want to see a true but they claim to how anti-blackness is able to use the myth of the minority to then oppress black bodies for a civil society will just code and consume the one political project, making Asian Americans who are conscious of anti-blackness the new form of our minority, which impact turns to confirm that given that we can only start from the level of theorizing and end to the world as we know versus transferable action within civil society is not burning and great anti-racist organizing as far as white supremacy. There's no such thing as anti-racist in the same bodies that were able to be racialized twice, that were able to view as rational, authoritarian, and deserving achieving activists are to stop by police will not be viewed as inherently criminal suspects. She continues anti-racism. Makes white people those valuable people, non-white people are forced to feel dependent and grateful on white people who interact with us. We are to feel capable of white activists reproducing the actual structure of white supremacy in the pictures on the lives of non-white activists who do not interact with you and activist profile. The alternative is the power to pose the question, is the ability to pose the impossible question of whether or not the subjectivity can be returned to the same, but whether or not the term out can be returned to the savage. Our roots and evidence indicates that the positionality of the black subject gestures towards a disconfiguration of civil society from the coherence of civil society. The black subject beckons with the incoherence of like civil war, which is also the top part of the one to see a war that reclaims black is not as a positive value, but as a politically let's say our black bullets and evidence indicates that this is able to repair the demolished subjectivity of the slave to simple to intervene into the dominant antagonism of civil society that the dominant antagonism of civil society that verifies and structurally adjusts black savage in the agent. Now her argument is that they are structural analysis because they analyze the CIA drug trafficking, but this web evidence is about a CIA is a recognition of a contingent conflict, which is proven to through historical shifting of things like crack to marijuana, which is not a structural analysis of conflictual contingent analysis of war drugs. They are not a critique of the larger structural paradigm of criminality, anti-blackness, which it's only done through the, which is only done through the alternative, which is only done through the alternative when they see instead forecloses that possibility through their analysis of the analysis of the CIA intervention in the war on drugs, particularly in the context of the opium drug movement, which they will never be able to effectively get at the level of the alternative, which is that only the alternative cannot resolve the impacts of the criticism, also the impacts of the case debate, given that the power to pose the question allows us to fundamentally and pedagogically rethink the way that we engage in pragmatic political resistance, which that the alternative is a prerequisite to any type of mass mobilization that would probably never even occur anyway. Any one of the affirmative, which is that you can only go negative.
So this piece of Malcolm evidence you read talks about how there's no such thing as a white anti-racist, and it's also written by an Asian woman. How does our advocacy, like I guess, fall in the category of like white anti-racism, like white activist movements?
Well, the evidence is particularly used to describe the inherent structure of anti-blackness and white supremacy. What Nopper is indicating is that given the way that white supremacy and anti-blackness operate as a paradigmatic structural impossibility of civil society, she indicates that there is no potentiality for things like a resuturing or a reification or a transformation of things like civil society. So her argument is that in the context of white people are incapable of being anti-racist because of the larger structural paradigm.
Okay.
That is applicable to the affirmative, given that Asian Americans are never able to fully overcome the myth about a minority simply by transforming or reforming civil society. For instance, I give the example that the way that civil society will use your app in the real world is that the model minority or the Asian body who becomes conscious of anti-blackness will become the new model minority.
All right, okay, so I have a question about that actually. So what is the alternative to becoming conscious about anti-blackness? What can Asian Americans do? Are we supposed to remain a neutral subject that's like just takes what is occurring?
Well, in the context of this debate, we think that it would have been a better question of posing whether or not it is capable or possible to return subjectivity to the slave. Our argument is that this is a fundamental shift in the way that we produce pedagogies about the way that we teach grassroots organization in the real world, because our
But doesn't that still meet the fitting? Doesn't that still fit the idea of an Asian that is aware of anti-blackness, thus being the same like model minority? I think that.
No, I don't think so.
But why not?
Because
isn't that an awareness?
Model minority mutiny, as per your Jung evidence, starts from the premise that we can become informed Asian citizens about anti-blackness and then take grassroots.
All right, I have another question.
To transform the political, economic, and social lives of Black people. Our argument is that we should not start our politics in a place of transforming, but a place of absolute destruction.
So in context, when I answered that, we don't defend the state or any reformism.
Yes,
if we're
that's
taking
not
this,
your
so it doesn't
Jung
matter. So it's what Jung says. It doesn't matter what we are advocating in this debate round.
Okay, first off, you as a person is not disconnected from your wanting to see sovereignty advocate. No.
We cannot advocate portions. So do you agree with Wilderson's argument that Asians are only junior partners in the struggle for liberation?
I mean, I don't know what that would get you, sure.
So
I still think that we should start the fundamental thesis of our political engagement from the impossibility of what can occur in civil society versus a pragmatic, contingent, conflictual form of political solution.
Also, when you talk, can you explain your force-telling argument to me?
Force-telling?
Force telling.
Part of the Wilderson evidence. So the portion that you talked about in terms of the distinction between Black and white women, he indicates that Celia and Jones were forced to tell their story about sexuality and sexual exploitation in a way that was able to be coherent to political institutions and political structures, which just works to impact your child evidence when you indicate that Asian women need to come forth about the sexual type of exploitation, which becomes a new way in which civil society uses the Asian American identity to oppress particularly Black women. The Troy will talk to you about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Is this pep right now?
No, it's not.
not paying attention. That was not cool. Did I?
Wait,
That's
did.
it. No, it's not. Second part. So quick. Yeah, we're good to go. What's the other?
On the Black Nations. The docility and passivity of Asian women is not inclusive of Black women's experience, which doesn't disrupt the criminalization of Black bodies, because the root of Black bodies criminalization or Black women's criminalization is from the womb. The site of reproduction of the Black woman is the site of death. Focusing on Asian violence, even when it's tied to anti-Blackness, anti-Black violence reproduces anti-Black by facing the singularity of anti-Blackness and Oriental liberation politics towards upward mobility and right into scenario 15. The speed and actions of response to hotel space misopropelled by anti-Black race abuse and with the responses to systematic large cultural attitude pertaining to the larger South Asian community causes them to make easy scapegoats to lower class and desire class mobility, shoring up the status quo, presence is American driven math and naturally collude class interest, U.S. interest, and ignore that a group of capitalists and lives of poorest Americans and the native color suffering some other groups, even the most progressive, free, talented, and even the outrage whose police were repressing progressive fields and not long-term system convention they collectively hotel was guilty of one of the social crimes about the innocent somehow set aside counting the nation of the immigrants when in fact the country has been built by genocide and slave labor. Case of violence withheld need to focus on the prevalent in cities into Black culture that is such form that doesn't manifest itself in physical violence and identified as Black violence and exclusion practices of immigrants, which is the biggest fear that might be identified as Black, which means that they don't get access to their role in valid when you see the one theorizations of Blackness seem to begin with the Black matrix in order to understand the consequences of anti-Blackness. Black reproductivity is the site for both the symbolic and material subjugation of Black women's experience of races, the gender balance and folding us back into the marginalization, but also the attempt to fold our experiences into Asian women Americans' experience, which means that they were closed house sexuality laid the foundation for Black women's relationship to violence through chattel slavery. They were reduced to the object who can reproduce the object. This is how anti-Blackness affects Black women. Which means that the model minority is not able to solve her criminalization after realism is the better alternative, because it calls for a greater scrutiny to the assault against Black reproductivity and under-theorized feature of Black activity by confronting the theoretical limitations of political practices and conceptualizing freedom. The next step is that the one you see excludes trans women by furthering a movement that is silent on this, following back to Black trans women as face harsher levels of anti-Blackness because of internalized transphobia and heteronormativity. Without an active focus on this, they cannot disrupt their criminalization, but they also only can replicate anti-Blackness and heteronormativity within these movements, because they are transphobic. You only push them to the back, which impact turns their role of the ballot, because they enable oppression and the criminalization by siding with trans people. This Elliot and 10 taking the diversity of trans lives into account this theory to the development of inclusive feminist theories and practices on violence against women, trans persons, including not limited internationally publicized murders of Tina Quest and Jarl Hyper urgent the public awareness to alleviate and trans people and persons to trans life both inside and outside the queer communities enables a host of oppressive practices to persist, from differential access to hormones and surgery and healthcare to criminalization, transsexualized order and governed by and controlled through the criminalization of prostitution and poverty and the illness and discrimination attended on their low social and economic backgrounds, but also as sex workers in which the works of the majority experience of obstacles are noticed and acts as critical rethinking assumptions that underlie the gender difference marginalization of trans persons, the fact that transsexual unwriters have been unwritten soul food theory and represent and official starting over beyond gender theory that have further critical engagement with trans issues and co-cares about social justice to clearly warn. And the next step is the Jones evidence, which indicates that these legal liberals performance paradigms are just like the civil rights movements, which foreclose black radical movements because it perpetuated the settler state's agenda that pacified radical resistance. The one you see is just that, because it extends to Black Lives Matter movement, which is a self-nullifying politics assimilation, because it refused to radically challenge anti-blackness and white supremacy, because it is focused on resetting the settler sociological notion of racism by perpetuating the classical respectable Negro who is engaged within the movements within these movements. Our Jones evidence indicates that there are no hashtags or mobilizations around slave revolts or around Black Panther movements or the Black Liberation Army who actively use counter-violence to revolt against anti-blackness, to resist these types of paradigms. If they oppose those types of movements, that means that they can only fold themselves back to the legal liberal performance paradigm that is used and controlled by the state to pacify resistance and keep anti-blackness as the main structure in place, which means that they only replicate the model minority.
Running from.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, stop prep. 324. No cards.
Yeah, literally.
Wait, can you go?
Running it. 327 use total.
It'll be the criticism flow, going straight down pretty much, starting with the permutation, theory, bit, and then going down the lengths. Well, yeah, well, sorry, case, and then critique.
That got confusing. What was the order?
Case, and then pretty much block order of the two NC. Anyone not ready?
Wait, I don't have.
There is no one there.
What?
No one there.
Can you save it?
No,
No.
ready?
Welcome to the model minority beauty, the role of balance to vote for whoever best ideologically and argumentatively disrupts the criminalization of the black body. Voting after challenges the anti-black violence drug war in 3 ways. First, reveals the CIA conspiracies against black bodies via funneling crack from South American street gangs, facilitating heroin production in Southeast Asia to go fund counterinsurgency. That's the level of equivalence to understand from society being structured through the black body paradigm. Nakagawa says if the broken white supremacy price contemporary politics, obviously because of the way that the American community works by constructing criminal black, all others are black and assertive from Asian Americans interrogating their ontological position on the white side of the minority, declare solidarity with those who have been placed in the black side. Now, the unfortunate evidence says this starts with certainty with Justice Carlos, Judge Broader political movements now, the critique.
Or actually, stand there, sorry.
Second choice in COVID is abs importance that they fight and the fight against white supremacy includes the discussion of how racial stereotypes, including black and brown women, have been criminalized, hypersexualized, and in contrast to the docile, submissive women, which means we have a Christmas so back all the black matrix 2017, which index began New York and also there's a question of give me back light to the certain source of all kinds of the evidence. Now let's go to the critique of the yes, we can appreciate fair interpretation to the question of competition. The biggest way they're going to win is one of the mission we should have voted from the one reason that says arbitrary standards who may be only 9 minutes to 1 AC, which means the link is an out, which gives a fraction just that's their interpretation. They kill coalition because they will disavow any movement that will didn't talk about what they want to talk about and say exactly they wanted it to. This is unique to the captions of the unique to sway from the Asian briefly mold of the model minority nor to stop being a tool of white supremacy, which they we'll get to more later. Now we have a permutation to that benefit. I'll get rather benefit of permutation. I'll get to that later. They say that for education. No, it's very good for education. First of all, you read mostly links of full effort, which is probably means we don't need to win this argument in order to win the affirmative. Also, there are nuances arbitrary considering especially since our authors are setting to their IURS with the in society. Well, just like nuances are not to say that also the you did not hear that the block answer the Nakagawa evidence, which gives our point of structural analysis. You should pretty skeptical when they say we're not structural analysis. Say permutation that's a shape evidence. The shape evidence is actually a very libertarian hack, and I knew because my old party used to read that card. Pretty bad. If that author's right, then we were all pretty much wrong in its favor on Janine should stand it because the bioconference article is right wing hackery, not relevant to this debate. And if next one is the permutation, we're going to go for permutation development, and we're not going for any other permutation means that you have to answer theory and that the permutation is also without permutation because we'll say we're structural analysis, which is the perfection affirmative. Now, first we're going to link to all of their arguments first to subjectivity, like yes, the agents have subjectivity, we should reject that. They should reject that subjectivity and lines up with the black body. It's a question of using your privilege to do something that isn't completely bad for everyone else. But our Willison's argument in red, white, and black is to dance with death. And the problem with politicalism is that they never dance with death, which means aligning with the black side of the binary is the dance with death that Willison calls for, which means we're winning a internal link to all their alternative solving. They saw the case, and we saw that too. Next one is the forced telling argument. It's relevant, unknown, like that, reveal her sexuality as nature woman as she chose to teach her arguments for pure relevant, same default sexualities, no, lengthy instance, links into broader questions of racialized and sexual stereotypes in the racial civil society, which means there's no homogenized connection to coalition thing. Also, your sex evidence is pretty generic, which says that we should have a social analysis that was about this lack of dominance, which you like tripping this argument. Next argument is that this is not because of minority immunity. His argument is sex argument that multiple conservative colonials and multiracial coalitions are bad, but argument is that it gives unique in the context of Asian Americans should align themselves with this the binary. Next one is they say coalition is bad, but this contradicts evidence of BLA and Black Panther Party. Say it's good, we'll get to that more later. Now the conscious rating of the link is pretty embarrassing argument. Makes zero sense. It's all the conscious rating. When people learn something, it is something to be avoided. It's a foreign conscious rating, or it's a semantic distinction. It's not really relate. Also, qualifications inevitable conscious rating so that the anti-racism is racism. The status argument goes out. Aaron's when it comes to circle it says that the argument that there is no such thing as a white anti-racist. Neither was a white, but there is a Jewish scripting Aaron as what was exactly the argument every time some side shows to script. Aaron has the white bodies and can't do the fair and pull her back to the white side matter, which is the reason of your piece of young evidence that historically the minority myth was used to suppress black political movements of black rage, which is the reason that the affirmative is good because it allows the black movements to be self-determining. At least we're not enrolled by Arizona, we roll by argument now and say that CIA's analysis is continued. No, this one person CIA one is the constant one, which is the broader context of structural antagonism. That's the Alexander evidence indicates that it is the latest wave of commercialization of black folks, which all Alexander with evidence which means we are structural as possible. We are structural now. Their own next term is alternative. They say pedagogical changes, a few arbitrary that doesn't cost money, not blah. But listen, we don't give back putting anything. Give back the land. Give back to who? What happens to black people if we give back the land? These are fundamental questions. You should answer the consequences. Otherwise, we're going to get to nowhere. Also, we have this after alternative because it silences the voices of Asian Americans. Either it does silence the Asian Americans and the impact of one ACs and this out to the alternative, or it is not included in the permutation to solve all this question. Next, arguments about some of the black women. I guess that about that term being their evidence on the quote 2 for their evidence. Or is that first of raising up Patel got a faster response to sexuality because he's not a minority because they saw him as why they tried to skip him back, which means the affirmative that this is the affirmative is fundamentally true, which is the lynching argument. Also, next, or is that the evidence claims that all immigrants are here to upper class mobility, which is the same attempt of trying to script immigrant bodies into the whites of the paradigm, which is uniquely devastating considering the country's drug evidence analysis of 2011, sponsored by black political movements. The next argument is that the crux of their translate. Listen, Starbucks is bad. It's criticizing transphobic conversations in the Black Lives Matter movements. We say we are key to black self-determination movements. That's fine. No link there. If anything, our code brings discussion of black, trans, and non-cisgendered women, which means we're letting this argument. And also the Jones link is also terrible. It says that you can't hold yourself for every bad person, rebel in the black resistance movement. We say that we were key to suppress Black Panther, which is something their evidence is a good thing, which means the act is fundamentally good. We're linking all the respectability, that's exactly what minority myth says.
Two questions. Your name is Aaron, right?
Yes.
And what firm did you go for?
Development.
There's more than one.
Yes. sites, flesh out what you want. Not necessarily.
Okay. The order is the criticism of the overview, and then the presentation.
One of the times.
He's obsessed with this seated, self-use seated thing. Okay. So,
one of these minority communities is only capable of foreclosing structure without suspecting black as they are seen. They are considered very unique. This question that controls the direction of the league. The impact of any action taken in civil society that attempts to transform or shift power relations, which is the one I see. Drug evidence have political structure's value. Our humanity is the life, the logical life performance of that structure in the reinforced position of colonial human. This is which is the root cause of society impact because it falls to sleep, established grab us up against a coherent narrative of pain that was structurally adjusted. It brings us, I can see, well, one of these will say is the only as a debate is the powerful question of the impossible question, which is the precondition to not only grasp to the condition, but also not to the condition, which is to concede a prerequisite argument out of one of y'all. Now, I will do the part they here. They do not get a permutation to meant to make this. Makes a permutation, making a affirmative or not. To test whether or not the affirmative is a good idea because it forecloses the possibility to the question you want it up. You want to see strategic, but choice you want to see strategic, political option, which is problematic for education, but also for also for analysis of calculating black seats as a perm. He says the structure of this advantage you have dominance, but you also have infinite prep to be able to defend what you did and did not say, which is uniquely key to negative ground give that and also despite our one language means the one seems also leads me to the perfect teaching the separate because they have to foreclose the ability to call the one is the starting point of the minority out of order for the permutation of function, which is the voting fairness and the case because it makes it want to see the future talk be a moving target with visibility possibility for resolving anti-structure, anti-blackness, other type of shiftiness is also a logic of the anti-blackness that allows them to script them out of minority to be used to be facilitators of anti-blackness for facilitators of anti-blackness to cause one of the impacts on the Schaefer evidence is actually really good. You should answer it instead of a shitty joke argument. Now Schaefer evidence indicates that attaching yourself to the institutional logic of the debate through the historical colonization method of the permutation attached to wanting to violate institutional purposes that allows them to recreate the myth of the minority to allow each body to be used as a fungible resources to implement to be having institutional further structural positions of anti-blackness, which also turns the affirmative outside the criticism, which means that the affirmative will never be able to resolve the alternative debate, but actually cause it the impact structure anti-blacks. They also see that there's no motherfucking that benefit to the permutation, and the only one that they could possibly have is the myth of the minority, which is the impact about a link debate, which I will do here. Our first piece to consider James evidence indicates that the black matrix is the best starting point for resolving structural position of anti-blacks, because we need to start from the question of black reproductivity in order to understand how civil society replicates itself, i.e. black women who birth come out and increase the condition for slave labor for the minority to be even being utilized and mobilized against blacks in the first place, which means that this is not a linkable mission, but a link of the commission that outweighs the affirmative, because without second recognition, our James evidence says it has to pass the first that it falls the black women back into a male rigor of stuff, not even want to see and focus on the larger structural criminality in the prison industrial complex, which our James evidence indicates is the structural unique position of the male grammar stuff, which forecloses an analysis of when the black women are structured in the larger paradigm of anti-blacks, but it also falls black women back into the Asian experience, i.e. the Cho evidence about the Asian American passivity, which Aaron in the cross-section of the two is taking the universalized, which he raises the structural position of black women that's not passive but as aggressive and deviant and hypermasculine, which fractures the foreclosures and impacts the role of valor, but also because they also call their coalition in the permutation arguments, and the second argument that I go for is the subjectivity or performance argument that they're not properly handled. I will say in the Harvard evidence indicates affirmation of the myth of the minority is an attempt to restrict political subjectivity, which disavows the impossibility of the entity for the slave and establishes the integration rhetoric of that text narrative of disenfranchisement, increasing possibility from a political basis for celebration of reform, i.e. the piece of conceded junk evidence that I read that indicates that we offer the minority as a hope to transform the U.S. political, economic, and cultural system. The value of humanity over capital accumulation of one is there when I see junk evidence. I will say in the Harvard evidence indicates that this alternative relocation of agency that attempts to carve out a space of freedom just resituates the civil society in order to revalue or demonize humanity, which is two because it impacts the first, that is negation of blackness and the reconstruction of the reification of anti-blackness. Even if we don't want the ultimate, this is still a terminal impact turn insolvency, take out into the affirmative, you can know negative
It's actually because what is Harvard evidence indicates that it is colonial humanism which restructures the political foundation of civil society. The second is it allows enforcers of force telling Black agent stories that require to disavow her status, distinguish her status as Black agent so that she can tell the story about sexuality, which is co-evidence in a meaningful way to white dominant colonial flavors, leads to the negation of what creating a basis for new forms of self-hatred are. You can see that Jones evidence also is an insight to the civil rights logic of the one I see is the one I see piece with this accuracy piece of evidence on the case of me, but also the logic and the whole foundation of the fucking dumb or Jones evidence indicates that this civil rights logic is creates a basis for the settler slave state to exist because the settler state should exist in a paradox when which it calls for civil rights, but it's incapable of falsely political participation, which means that you don't have a structural analysis, even if you read this Nakagawa evidence, because your structural analysis is only ever able to stop the war and guns and not the larger structure looking anti-black, given that yes, we had crack, now we have things like marijuana and selling whiskies, which is Eric Garner, which is that you don't get how blackness is constantly redefined and shifting to maintain a larger structural paradigm. You say dance with death, that's not you, because Wilson is talking, indicating about giving up on subjectivity, not embracing one position and act on the world. You make the script argument, but we script error. You can see that anti-black and minorities can never overcome their unique position because anti-blackness will always use the minorities to reify and form the One Project back in, i.e. Asian Americans who become conscious of anti-blacks and become the new vintage minority impact turn into the affirmative, which means only the alternative is all.
Did you subtract crap? Like 320. I know it's 327 used from like 6.
You had like two. I think it's 240 something.
We'll run through it. I'll figure it out. Thank you. more?
Yeah. So it's remember.
Yeah, there's not like to say
I
this.
haven't had to change it.
It's always fun, switching sides, right?
Never on the app, but you can't flip down the app. Fine, now we're in politics today.
None of y'all have switch sides.
It's gonna be overview, case, and then critique.
The question of this debate is whether or not it should continue to be used as a tool of white supremacy or not. The mono-minority myth must be disrupted. The junk evidence talks about historically, the mono-minority myth has been constructed. You can trace it back to a New York Times article at the high point of the black political resistance movement, like what the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army, which is exactly the type of political movement Towson TW and evidence says it's a good model, means we are a prerequisite to the advocacy. The affirmative methodology requires revealing the complicity of the government and crimes against people of color to revolt with the mono-minority mutiny. The actions of the CIA and its joint oppression of Asian black bodies is proof how the actions of the state is inherently anti-blackness society. We still live in is rooted in whiteness, naturalizing, erasing the gratuitous violence imposed on the colored bodies. We made it clear this entire round that we do not believe in the possibility of reforming or deeming the state for this reason. We don't have to be held to the parts that we didn't even read in the one I see. Our argument here is that we are bringing down civil society through this method of refusing to be part, continue to be a tool of white supremacy. The negative only tells Asian Americans that effectively that they should be pushed back to the white side and stay over there. They don't provide an alternative. They don't provide a space where Asian Americans can fit. This movement just ignores the ways in which the model minority has impacted Asian Americans' experience, in which my life is divided if I don't fit into the success narrative of the model minority. And if I speak out, this is crucial. The idea that the idea that we can't participate with Asian Americans are too scripted as white as further, not for evidence that they read in the 2 and C is proof that they're scripting and only telling us that we should continue to work on the side of white supremacy means that their movement can't work without first analyzing this model. This round is a form of activists calling green space and flipping its head to return power to those who have been powerless. This is powerless. The criminalization of black bodies and xenophobia of Asians is a condition rooted in American Kentucky. That's the structural analysis we make, but through Alexander Ted evidence. The only way to turn this back and expose the underlying justifications of this construction. And a call to the examination of relation of other questions to anti-blackness and saying in solidarity with the demand that our voice to be heard in academic messages is debated. The judge believes our method is an important method for resisting anti-blackness, and the other grounds they should vote off. There's no reason why the space of resistance can't ask the impossible question of returning Turtle Island to the savage. Your analysis relies on sympathy. Their analysis relies on the idea that Asian Americans are folding their experience and the black experience, but their analysis fails to recognize it's not a simple combination of the experience, but rather a recognition of how these issues interact in the decision to work towards anti-blackness, which is the main issue here for both parties. Our first piece of junk evidence talks about how Asian Americans don't experience opposition in the same way as black bodies do, and we aren't scripted in the same ways by society, and recognizing these nuances and how we can fit into resisting white supremacy is important to our advocacy. They say that this is a foreclosed idea, but we are not foreclosed when we resist the narrative closure that the CIA that the government put forth, that the CIA had no complicity in things like the drug war and Golden Congo. By resisting this narrative closure, it leads to an open conversation about how the government has created
construct these ideas within the minds of America. They say that this side to the advocacy is that we are remaining on the white side and continue to be used as a tool. We have no place in this methodology. Only they say that we don't get a permutation, but it's a method by method debate. But if we win that at the starting point already include their analysis, that means the permutation default is the best option in this round, and the only way for Asian Americans to be included in this previously when they are previously absent in conversations on critical race theory, and they say that they voted for fairness. But first of all, when Asian Americans are already left out of the conversation, there's no fairness. Begin with second, education is most important in this round. So I was talking about this round is the only standard here. They say that we are. We don't view this in the norm. Attaching to normal historical ways of debate is a waivers, but don't view this in the normal ways of perm. If our advocacy is removing a roadblock to better Black liberation movements, we were always a permutation to begin with. We are turning against white supremacy. They say that the matrix creates this condition, but when we are challenging the broader question of how sexuality and white male dominant schemes play into how we are scripted as this, that means this is an inclusion of how the Black female and Black motherhood fits into the idea of how white supremacy is created, meaning that we still link through this argument. We are challenging this no grammar suffering that we are talking about, not universalizing our idea. We talk about how Asian Americans and Blacks suffer both at the state, but in different ways. If you're still critiquing the same colonial structure, means that they are mutually exclusive. We are winning more Lincolns than they're winning. We are winning more Lincolns than they're winning, which means vote Abby. Don't get the prayer versus the trans silence link. There is a terrible depressing anecdote. Trans women went to a rally over a transphobic conversation. Obviously, not the app. Or when I see Doug Link talks, we need to send a struggle on trans disabled queer cis woman. Darcy and Sicker Muslim. Second, the Jones evidence, which is the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army are really good models of violence. Cross the white overview, minority movements, a root downfall of these movements, which short circuits alternative women turning a respectably politics argument from the blog because the minority myth is the foundation of the politics that there is a respectable minority who can succeed, who can have high incomes and commit less crime. And because of this is used to berate the Black body. If we remove this, this is a bringing down of these respectably politics, and we turn their sex and link. It doesn't account for all minorities. First, we're structural, thus involving coalitions. The African form is uniquely good. They have no game on this other than some power tax cross-apply the overview. 2019 accused Asians on the white side that was impacted above, and they say reformism, but don't let them lift out the context of the fungibility argument that they're talking about. They're taking something complete, something that we didn't even read in the 1AC and saying this is them. Don't let them get away with their advocacy. This is just a silencing and further reiteration of the myth that we should stay docile to myths. It's pretty clear our advocacy believes in bringing that civil society. And this is foretelling, but we are revealing the structure with consent. Our co-evidence talks about how this is important to self-love and understanding to have the best relation to ourselves. Our co-evidence always is pretty good. It talks about how we always find reason and excuses. The negative is a contextualized example of another reason why Asian Americans should not be included in the movement. We don't need these excuses anymore. They say that we aren't asking for political engagement in the state or Asian American presence in civil society, but a radical shift in how the paradigm that we currently view race relations are not government evidence. There says, the evidence sometimes discriminates Asians on the white side of the binary. This is what we're talking about when they continue to create the model minority. Their argument that anti-Blackness becomes a new model minority ignores what being a model minority actually means. If Asians being conscious about anti-Blackness is bad, then we would rather be on that side. The alternative is Asian Americans who only try to exist on the white side of the binary. They say that the debate ground is about gaining consciousness, about understanding that just belief is a good idea, then he should put out.
Let's hear Young evidence and Jones evidence.
Our Young evidence.
Well, yeah.
So is that Towson TW?
Just the one, you can just
Yeah, I'm
use
just
the
gonna
one
grab
AC
one.
because there's like 5 of them.
And the Jones evidence.
That's the 2 AC. That's their one.
Which young evidence was like a time actually?
Just
I don't want to like.
She says in the first piece of Young evidence, you can give it that one.
okay.
Oh, the black.
Okay. This one?
Yeah.
That's the part of the jump stuff.
I'll just have it open here. Let me make it bigger.
Y'all enjoying the People's Tournament? Y'all enjoying the People's Tournament?
I was really sick yesterday.
It's this one.
Not too much.
And by the time I got back, my body was aching from my heels to my shoulder. And my ankles was awful.
You guys know what? I was talking about show during round 4. I was like, this.
Start giving out speeches, so I can go like 4 pictures.
You ever try playing that little pack of sluggies like that?
I need to, because you can see the trouble.
Yeah, I've heard before you're like, you're clear. I came here last year, already matched my win total after round 4, so yeah.
So you what? You matched your.
I matched West my win total
I
last
love
year.
it
But
when
last
it
year
does
was
that.
last year. We didn't have any next rounds.
What was your app? You were reading music?
We were reading, no, we read music after against Don Baker, and it went terribly. This wasn't ready. We didn't think it would be tea, and then they read tea.
How far are you?
Yeah, like thank you.
It's go to CC, right?
TV.
The D in milk is the.
Yeah. Case list was messing up.
Apparently, what case letters.
They're not perfect, honestly.
Yeah.
We're going to that over quickly.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
saying like this was particularly good round. I think there were a couple of structural things that could have made like vote either way much more easier. Uh, First, particularly, I think coming out of the one and C, I think y'all need to be very clear of like the questioning of the questioning of like the methodology that they provide. Right, I think that's the biggest issue I have coming out of the one and C, that there really isn't a sign of like real offense, right? And so it comes to like this question of methodology versus methodology debate, right? I think if you wanted to be more offensive here, you should have did a historical analysis, right? I think that John Carr only so specifically talked about like the Asian identity becoming a problem for the way in which blackness is criminalized in the 1960s, which historically don't make sense because the black has been criminal since slavery, right? So I think that a historical analysis would have put you in a better position to generate like actual offense. I think it could have just been a dissad about like controlling the count, like controlling the archives, right? I think that could have just been an effective strategy to generate offense at the same time, like give you leeway on this like methodology versus methodology debate. Which particularly I think is a good like starting point question, right? But I think that like just having a historical analysis just like legitimately dooms them because of the ways in which the one is structured around a particular instance in history where the Asian identity becomes one that problematizes like black identity. I think also when that is the contextualization, you need to be very careful of like them being able to ask like historical questioning of things like property rights and property ownership, like the ability of like the slave, which like kind of the bill of sale stuff that Farley talks about has never like been removed from the plantation, which means that like any acts that blackness engage in will always be a form of criminalized act, right? I think there's a lot of a better argument you can make, particularly in relation to blackness and material conditions and status quo, right? I think that's where your argument should be deposited on, right? That the ways in which the model minority myth is created is what produces like the notions of things like urban planning, things like population control, things like biopolitical power against like black and brown communities, right? Is that the Asian identity become the ways in which they can I guess you could say rationalize the way in which violence can be produced. Like, oh, look, you can be just like them, right? And because you are not just like them, we can now exterminate you. We can produce the violence against you, right? I think that's your articulation. It produces a lot of like questioning that I don't think that like their analysis in the K gets to, which is the problem of like material conditions, how material conditions are formed in and of the status quo now, right? If our argument is that society produces this social violence predicated off of like black people being able to assimilate via like the ways in which the Asian assimilate, and the fact that like black people don't assimilate like that is the ways in which they create a trope of control of identity and how identity is proliferated in society, right? So making the argument that the minority does not resolve the issue of the slave, right, but it does resolve the issue of material condition that exists in society today. Right? I think like if you frame the debate like that, it produces a lot more offense, right? That gets you away from the slave narrative. Also, just having some offense to like why like those kind of narrations of like black identity is bad and status quo. I think the block could have been much more like offensive in the sense that like I think you don't do enough analysis on this Joy James argument. I think like if you're gonna go for the starting point debate, I don't understand why there's not a historical analysis or b a more tangible discussion about like how the process of the black woman kind of like production of slaves is how we get to the position that America is in now, right? Which means we predate your argument first, and second is that like because of the production value of the black woman's vagina, that's the only way that you can have an antagonism to society, right? The reason why there's a black-white binary is because the black will always be the polemic opposite of the whiteness, right? And that this is not a question of just black-white binary, but it's a question of how like society plays out identity, and not necessarily just identity as in I'm an Asian woman, but identity in the sense of like those who can possess privilege and those who can be dispossessed of all privileges, right? So it's a question of absolute dereliction versus the question of access and privileges. We say that when you disidentify from those privileges, right, what you have done is only proven that you have the ability to like be fluid within society. We don't have that ability. Right, that in itself is just out of the ways in which subjectivity is created and how subjectivity can be maintained by certain people, or not maintained for the sake of like having civil conversations about like racism and like black versus Asian and stuff like that. Also think the sexing argument could have been blown up a lot more, right? I think particularly this was something I was expecting Troy to do a lot more work on, was just this notion of like colorblindness and like this notion of like multiracialism, right? And you could make these arguments of like a question of like, if these positions are about how we categorize race, then they won't ever resolve anything. Right, and I think like the entirety of like the entirety of the 2AC is predicated off of the way in which she identified, and not the ways in which she identified against systems of oppression. Right, I think you need to be very careful of that when you talk particularly about like the Asian identity, right? I think you need to talk about it in terms of how anti-blackness is created and not in terms of how the Asian identity deals with violence, right? I think if your argument is that like violence is created against the Asian body the same way it's created against the black body because of the ways in which we can like control, the ways in which like white supremacy, particularly white men, can control fantasies and desires about certain groups of people. Right, this is how anti-blackness functions. It's not about me talking about being an Asian woman. It's about the idea of how like our identities are mapped upon us and produces the anti-blackness and violence that happens in the status quo. Right, I think they get a lot of like access to the subjectivity when like your argument is just like I'm an Asian woman and this is like the oppression I face. Right, I don't think that's the discourse of the 2AC, but I think you let them get you into this trap of you identify as this and this is something that we can never access. Right, I think if your argument is that because violence happens like this, right, violence is also or can be articulated in other formats in the same way, right, which kind of gets into this whole conflation debate, right? I don't think you should say that because we speak from a position of like the Asian woman, we also can incorporate things like black women, right? I think that's conflation like anything. Right, I think the argument you need to make is that like speaking from like certain social locations, it explains how anti-blackness works on multiple levels. Right, I can't speak for the black woman, or I can't speak on the black woman, right? But I can talk about like how like my identity creates violence against others, and how my identity also dictates violence for me. Right, I think your argument is like we also can solve with black women is extremely damning, particularly when you're not answering back the James analysis, which is really talking about like the historical like ramifications of what it means to be a black woman in society. I don't think you should read Nopper. I don't think Nopper was productive in any sense, right? I think if you're going to make an argument about like identity and the way in which identity protection, I think like going for like the multiculturalism, like the colorblindness argument was much more effective than like the Nopper argument, because I kind of agree with them to some level that it is a form of scripting which could be dangerous, right? But I also believe that like the argument is correct, just like the warranting of the argument is problematic. I think the 1 yard, first of all, I think in the 2AC, right, there should not have been a multiplicity of permutations, right? Two of the permutations were exactly the same thing, like do the AF or do the alt, because the alt is the AF, right? I think at the point where you create these kind of distinctions, only prove that like you try to like crowd out kind of discussions of how the alternative and the 1AC functions as similar things or similar strategies. Right. I think if it is a methodology versus methodology debate, then the question becomes is whether or not these methodologies can be done simultaneously, and not necessarily that we can just do them all within the 1AC. I think the argument you should be going for is a question of like we can do these things simultaneously, right? Like is that we can acknowledge that there's an impossibility of giving back the slave subjectivity, right, or giving back the land in the case, which I think is the ways in which you address the Wilson evidence. Right, the Wilson-Hartman evidence, right? I think you can make that argument that we should also like produce that impossibility, but at the same time critique the ways in which that violence is, I guess you can say, mapped upon them through model minority, right? The biggest issue I have with a permutation that usually permutations don't have contextual ways of me like identifying how it resolves anything, right? Like do both, I don't know what that means. Right, particularly when like the only like level of answering you have for their alternative is that we can't give back the land, but nothing about the notions of like subjecthood for the slave, right, which is the warranting that they go for, which I think completely crowds out any of the defense that you're trying to generate against the alternative. And also it just makes the permutation seem like it really don't have a net benefit. Right, I think your articulation of permutation is that like you should allow them to have this like have this possibility, but we should also like criticize the ways in which model minority happens. Right, these things cannot simply just exist against one another. Right, if anything, they are having these together and working simultaneously. Right, is the best way for us to address anti-blackness. Right, that's a better articulation of permutation than do both. Right, I think if that's the articulation, it goes back into like the idea that like legitimately, even if their arguments are correct, right, it still is this like larger question of the material violence that is produced because of the minority myth, right, which I think gives you warrant for like why the 1AC is a net benefit, right? I think particularly in the 1AR, it should have been clean. I think you should have had like one analysis of what the permutation looked like, and you should have like you should have had some kind of defense to whether or not, even if I buy that the permutation is bad, that the app would still solve back for it, right? I think that's what you lose when you don't go for the other two alternatives, is the explanation of the permutation in reference to the affirmative, right? I think the issue I'm having is like, I don't know what the perm does for the app or for the neg. I think the 2R was shaky. I think like a large focus on like the link debate and like whether or not this is competitive is okay, but I think that like you should have went for this roll of ballot claim, right? It's completely conceded in the 1AR, right? And if anything, I think that like this question of like the roll of ballot tied to like the trans link is uniquely important because you generate that as like unique offense that like how certain bodies don't get addressed when we have these discussions. I'm just like, yeah, that probably definitely turns the roll of ballot. But like that analysis is not in the 2R. There's a couple other things that I think could have been done more effectively. Probably like just more explanation of like the impossibility like alternative, right? I think you should also did like just like some real good calculative weighting of the alternative versus the affirmative, right? Your argument is that like I can vote for the AF even if like all you have to do is prove the AF is a bad idea, which I think is true. But at the same time, it's like if you can resolve issues of the AF as well, which is the structural antagonisms that are necessary, right? Then why not do it? Right. I think at the top there should be an explanation that specifically talked in reference to like the Hartman and Wilkes and stuff, right? Because the overview is just like these are arguments we're winning instead of the overview is let me explain the case to you. I think the 2AR was good. The issue is that I think that like there's a lot of things that you're behind on, particularly these disad / link work that's done on the permutation debate that I don't think like you get to a sufficient time to like make like offensive reasons why the app is a better idea, right? I think like they do a lot of like offensive like managing on the permutation debate that they then couple with like a link debate. Right, I think the easiest way out of this was to like probably kick the permutation, then just go for like solvency outweighs and answer back the fact that like they are really non-responsive to the fact that like your arguments are like all either non-unique decay or get you out of the link debate. Right, I think particularly the discussion of 1AC gets categorized as something that is bad, but I don't think it's bad, right? And I think particularly when they read the Jung evidence, right, against you, right, it does kind of counterwrite your Jung evidence, right? But at the same time, I don't think that it precludes the ability for us to engage in these like discussions of why it's important that we have scholarship and foundation about the consciousness that Asians need to engage in. Because if this issue is structural violence and Asians are keeping up that structural violence, then we should be able to challenge that as well. Right? I think if there was a bigger articulation of like solvency and just a better like framing of the solvency versus the K debate, that I could have probably evaluated like I could probably move away from a lot of like the offenses that generate on the link debate. But my problem, like the solvency question is always kind of left open, and also I just think that they're winning substantial offense to get the permutation or the affirmative alone, which is the reason why I vote Nick. Any questions or anything? Okay.
Thank you so much.